Hey guys, what's up? Stock Retail coming back to you. Boy, if you've not seen yet, but many of you probably have, Cinemark had fantastic Q3 earnings. They reported before the bell today. Imax just reported. They had fantastic earnings and gave amazing forward guidance. And so I want to talk a little bit about, you can see the screenshot. You probably already know. Next week is AMC earnings. Had the forecast video on that for quite a while. That's been out. But now that we're seeing IMAX and Cinemark's results, so what does that mean for AMC next week? I want to talk that through a little bit. So if you hadn't seen, geez, Cinemark came out. You can go find this on their investor website or on the SEC Edgar site. That's where I like to look at earnings results. And by the way, I'm going to go through some details from their earnings filing and kind of say what it means to AMC. So they had record high revenue. You can see kind of what I've underlined here. Record high revenue of $922 million for them. Obviously, AMC is a little bigger, but that's great for Cinemark, great for the movie industry. They grew 5% year over year, so that's fantastic. And then, actually, by the way, that's in the face of some FX headwinds for them that we're going to talk about and how that is or is not the same or different kind of than AMC. So it's even kind of in a way even better than what it sounds like. And then they had record net income, record bottom line earnings, a record high third quarter, I should say. And, why is that so great? Well, you've seen a few videos from me already, including the Q3 forecast, where I said this would continue to prove the thesis for the movie industry, and in particular AMC, that on a lower box office than pre-COVID, we would have higher earnings. Well, Cinemark just proved that. So it just should make you, it's like one more little proof that what we're saying about AMC is correct. And so that is just super, super exciting to me. The only reason I compare is just to show you, a comparable in the industry. Otherwise, there's a lot different here, right? Like I've shown you many times, Cinemark is trading at, more than sort of kind of 4 times AMC's price to sales, and more than that if you think about sort of forward earnings guidance as well. So I am not comparing these stocks. I'm just saying this helps us understand where we are and where we're going. And man, is it bullish. And we're going to talk about some of the details. And then IMAX, so look at what I've highlighted here. They came out and said, IMAX expects to deliver a record global, record earnings in 2025. So they expect to set their all-time best earnings for a full year next year. Wow, that's going to be good. So it's just more confirmation of what we've been saying. Cinemark saying the quarter we just finished was an all-time record Q3 for them. IMAX saying, hey, the year ahead is going to be an all-time record for them. Same industry we're in, guys. And so it's just bananas that Wall Street, you'll go look. You will see positive article after positive article for Cinemark and IMAX, but somehow that's just not holding true because we have negative articles on AMC, and you already know why. And by the way, that should be confirmation also of the short thesis and the short squeeze. Should make you very, very bullish. At least it does to me. I'm saying the word should, that's an opinion. But boy, these results and then the way that the media, which is an arm of Wall Street, acts towards us and acts towards them in face of these results is very bullish for me. All right, let's go through some specifics on Cinemark so that you can see some details. So if I go back, notice this reported $189 million net income, and that was their all-time record for the third quarter. Well, you need to know in that net income for Cinemark, there's $43 million of savings. Basically, it's think of like negative taxes. So they did not have to pay taxes, and not only that, they got to book savings to their bottom line of $43 million. It kind of looks like income. So of that 189, 43 million of that was them actually basically getting money back from the government in a way, saving money on taxes. So I'm not quite sure, I haven't obsessed their business the way I've obsessed AMC's. AMC's I know inside and out. I've looked at every line item in the income statement and the balance sheet all the way back to 2018 many, many times over. You guys know that. I've talked about that. So not totally sure why. If you look at the last 9 months, it seems to be kind of every couple quarters they're getting some savings, probably just some holdover, like maybe they've carried forward some losses. There's different ways of accounting. So the accountants who listen to me, they're probably already going, oh, I know what that probably is. But you can carry forward losses sometimes. So I don't know if they're still, working through some of the COVID era or whatever they're doing. That looks a little different than AMC to me, I believe. So I just want you to know, like right off the bat, let's skim that off the top when we're comparing, that Cinemark has this in the last 9 months, $70 million of sort of income from taxes instead of expense, and then 43 million in this quarter that I'm sort of not going to count. I'm thinking that's a little bit different than AMC, and I'll talk probably a little bit more about that in a minute. Here's some key metrics, but first, before I go into these, something I noticed in their earnings report. You know, AMC has Odeon and UCI. We have a pretty big presence in Europe. We've talked about that a lot. It looks to me, and I get this from a business standpoint. If you think about who's grabbing, you know, sort of which corner, who's grabbing which market. AMC is pretty strong in Europe and obviously the US. Cinemark, of course, has a strong presence in the US, but now I'm noticing in terms of international, Cinemark has gone more for Latin America. That's going to matter because I'm going to talk about foreign exchange rates. I'm going to talk about what that's done to Cinemark's earnings and how that's different from AMC. So hold on to that thought, but just showing you from their, this is actually from their sort of present investor presentation. You can also find that on their website. Kind of just talking about where their global presence is. And so there's one key difference, that they're more in Latin America. That's going to be a different consumer, a different economy, and even a different foreign exchange rates, where we're more in Europe in terms of our international business. So just, yeah, like I said, hold on to that thought. One thing I noticed that, and I'm going to end up by the end of this, I'm going to tell you kind of, if you take my earnings forecast that I've done, what are sort of potential upsides and downsides to that now that we're learning from Cinemark's and Imax's results. And so this is actually going to be one that you want to kind of take note of, and then I'll come back to it as a summary at the end. Film costs and advertising. I'm noticing that in Cinemark's earnings report. As a percent of admissions, I'm noticing that it actually went up. When you have blockbusters in particular, I think sometimes you give a little bit higher percent of the gate back to the studio. There is one thing I'm just asking myself, though. I noticed that Cinemark had their row here in their earnings report says film costs and advertising. AMC's row, if you went to our earnings report, would basically just say film costs. And so I don't know whether we're reporting those differently or not. I don't know whether AMC bundles some of the advertising into that row or not. And so there's one difference there, perhaps. I'd have to look over time. I'd need to pull, you know, years of Cinemark results and try to compare to AMC and just see, do I think that could mean that this row goes up for AMC? If you watch my earnings forecast for Q3, I talk about film costs as a percent of revenue. And I talk about how I forecast kind of flat to the same rate as last year. I was up a tiny bit, but not up this much. So Cinemark being up 2 points, that it raises your expenses. You're paying back more of your admissions to the studios. So I'm just saying, hey, note that this is a watch item going into our earnings. If AMC went up by the same amount, that's going to be downside. So I'm kind of, you know, showing you ahead of time a little bit what that might mean to our earnings. Cinemark's attendance is down, but here's where I want to draw out that whole kind of Europe versus Latin as well. Because if you notice, in the US, Cinemark's attendance is actually up 100K year over year. So same quarter versus the same quarter last year. But their international attendance was down significantly, 1.6 million. So I don't know the Latin consumer. I don't know what's been going on with movies in Latin America. You know, let's say local movies, you know, Spanish-speaking movies, or suppose Portuguese in Brazil. You know, what's going on with how our U.S. sort of Hollywood movies translating to Latin versus Europe. I've just got a feeling that AMC is not experiencing the same downward pressure on attendance. So I'm going to hope that actually doesn't compare so well. And by the way, actually, I should say compares more favorably for AMC. And by the way, remember, you know, with attendance down, yet Cinemark got this record revenue. So things are going very strongly for us in the movie industry. Imagine what that had looked like if, say, Latin America had showed up stronger in their attendance for Cinemark. So that, I think, is going to be a little different for AMC. I think on that one, we probably compare more favorably. I've talked to you guys a little bit about the history with you know, some competitors in the UK and how maybe we're going to start going the other way and getting some of our market share back and some stuff like that. So, but just letting you know what I see in Cinemark's earnings. And then notice that ticket prices are down for Cinemark, but that's really driven by foreign exchange rates with Latin America. I've told you that I worked for a Dow Jones company, you know, a company that is currently in the Dow Jones index. I worked there for 21 years. I specifically worked 2 jobs that would that gave me a lot of experience in this. One was for 4 years, I worked directly with our sort of global Treasury Department, which houses tax and foreign exchange. So I learned a lot about foreign exchange. And then the other job I had for a few years, I worked with Asia Pacific and Latin America. That was our business there, and I was leading teams. Well, I won't get into too much detail there, but the point is, I'm very aware of a lot of volatility with Latin foreign exchange. Argentina, Brazil, Chile. You can see on the map here, Mexico too, although this is Cinemark's map and they're not showing Mexico here, so I'm not too sure how strongly they show up there. But there's a lot of volatility and inflation. And so there are times where that can kind of, I've talked to you a little bit about before, that a U.S. company has to translate sales back into dollars. And so that has basically, if you look at their ticket prices per person, so they have less people that came in Latin America and their ticket prices per person translated back to dollars at a lower rate. So that was kind of draining on Cinemark's earnings, and yet they hit this record, right? So again, that should just tell you how strong this quarter really was. If you take away those foreign exchange headwinds, if they have better attendance, this would be even better. And so I think, I don't know this for sure, but I think those last two bullets are sort of in AMC's favor. I don't think we'll see our attendance down in Europe year over year, or at least not to this extent. And I don't think our ticket prices in Europe will be down year over year. I think the euro against the dollar is a different story than a lot of these, like the Brazilian real or the Chilean dollar or things like that. Or is it the Chilean peso? Forgive me on that one. Anyway, I think the exchange rates will be a lot different year over year. Okay, so I think that's going to be a lot better and more in our favor. So just things to know. And then here's one that's going to be really interesting to see. So if you look at Cinemark had a pretty big gain on investment. You can see net gain on investment in NCMI. So that's National Cinemedia. I forget the I right now. That's the, like when we watch the advertisements on the screen, before a movie and stuff. So AMC has an expense every quarter where we're paying in to NCMI, but we get to book kind of sales revenue back as well. It's a whole process of how that flows through all of AMC's statements. But the point is, if Cinemark had a $12 million gain, you can see this 11.6 in the quarter, and AMC, and if you look, actually Cinemark's amount that they're paying in is lower than AMC's, so it just means AMC's bigger and has a bigger interest in NCMI than does Cinemark. I'm real interested to see, could that end up showing up in our investment gain significantly? And the reason I bring that up is, I've told you that I forecast every line in the income and expense statement. This is one of the lines that I forecast. I forecast income gains and losses. Now, I've noted here Highcroft as well. I've told you guys before, from the beginning of a quarter to the end of a quarter, if you track Highcroft's stock movement and then sort of multiply by how many shares AMC has, then you book that here as income or expense. And so same here then for NCMI. We're going to find out. What I'm telling you really is that I wonder if there's upside to my forecast because that seems to have gone really well for Cinemark, and AMC is also connected to NCMI. All right. So here then is all kind of those pluses and minuses. I just mentioned the income expense. I talked a little bit about, so just kind of look here on the right, plus versus minus. So did Europe translate better than Latin? I'm going to say I think it did. So I think that could be in our favor. And again, just start from this baseline of Cinemark just had a record Q3 revenue and earnings. And so perhaps things are more favorable for AMC with regards to international business, I guess is what I'm saying. On the minus front, I talked about film costs a minute ago. Did film costs rise more than I had forecast? That would be a drain. That would bring us back down a little bit. Food and beverage. I want to note here, Cinemark had almost $8 a person. I think it was $7.97 a person in the US. And then internationally, again, we've got that Latin translation. It was a little lower. So what I'm wondering then is if Cinemark was that high in the US, and AMC has tended to, I think, don't quote me on this, I'd have to go look, because again, I haven't obsessed Cinemark's numbers the way I have AMC. But I think AMC has tended to beat Cinemark on both ticket price per person. We've got a lot more IMAX theaters, for example, so we have some more of the premium that drags our price average up. AMC has tended to be higher than Cinemark on ticket prices and on food and beverage per person, I believe. So my point is, we may have beaten my forecast. So if you go back and you see my Q3 forecast, you could just kind of file a note away that says, I wonder if we could have beaten these numbers. That would be nice. And then, I mentioned the investment gains. Are those better than expected? Perhaps we beat my number there. I have a very low number there because I kind of had a drag from Highcroft, and I've got to go back and double check if I even have that number right as well. But either way, I'm saying I think we could have some upside there. And then just remember what's different from Cinemark to AMC. So I already talked about, Europe versus Latin in terms of international business. I've, reminder that AMC has thousands of points of distribution. I've been calling it kind of 8,000. I'm sort of rounding that number. But, if you've got Walmart and Publix and Kroger and Amazon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we have thousands of points of distribution of popcorn. We have our own vertical line, our in-house brand of candy that, remember, that was selling out at times. And then AMC has significant improvements to debt and interest payments. And then I've talked about sort of the difference in taxes would potentially be pretty different from Cinemark to AMC. So I'm a fan of just saying some things out loud. And we're almost done here already, guys. Shorter video today. So say all of this out loud. Last Q3, the Barbenheimer quarter, AMC had positive earnings and positive cash flows. This Q3, we had a bigger box office. AMC had expanded popcorn by thousands of doors. We were live with popcorn last year, but remember at first we had maybe 500 Walmart doors, but now I'm saying we're like in 8,000 points of distribution. So we've gone from 500 doors and it's brand new to 8,000 doors. And maybe there's more brand awareness out in the marketplace that goes beyond just the apes. More people know about AMC popcorn. We had candy sellouts, full on selling out at times, and they had to get back in stock. So we know we sold a lot of candy, the AMC specific candy that we make higher margins on. We have lower debt than this same quarter last year. We just saw Imax and Cinemark setting records. And so Wall Street for sure is saying, wow, AMC is going to do great, right? Right? No. So say all that out loud. We had positive earnings last year. Everything is better this year. And look at what Walmart's saying. Somehow they think AMC went backwards. The consensus estimated, earnings per share forecast you can see is a negative 7 cents a share. The best forecast, this is just from the NASDAQ website that's just sweeping a few estimates. The best estimate is still negative. The lowest is deeply negative. Multiply these numbers by all of our shares and just you can get to understanding that they're saying we're going to lose money. Guys, that's insane. And I've been saying that's insane. And I've been telling you for a year. I actually had forecast this all the way last fall when the strike was hitting. So probably last November, I started talking about it. When the strike was hitting, I kind of pointed out what the whole next year would be so that I could prepare us mentally to get through the strike and know what the impacts were. And here we are. It's well known. It's pretty obvious. And yet Wall Street is, sort of flying in the face of the obvious. All you got to do is think for a minute of what does that signal? Why would they do that? Gameplay that out in your head. Why would they do that? And I know you know. And so don't be gaslighted on the fact that these guys are in way over their head in terms of what they've done to AMC and the problem they've created and why we're not leaving. So, a couple things. Remember that the Q3 earnings forecast, I've had that published for a while. I've actually posted that video directly on Twitter. Some of you, well, I guess if you're here, that's the wrong audience. I was going to say some people don't like to come over to YouTube, so it's over there, but it's here on my YouTube channel. I'm just showing you the screenshot of that video. If you can find a video that looks like this screenshot here, it's the Q3 earnings final forecast. I said it's going to be a record, but how big? Now that Cinemark set a record, I'm feeling... although I will say, I didn't say AMC would set an all-time record. I said AMC would set a record for the ape era. I think there's a quarter, I want to say it's either 2018 or 2019. There's one quarter I felt like we might not beat. But either way, I said we'd set a record for the ape era. Pretty obvious that's going to be right at this point. I've been saying, like I said, this was coming for a year. That's not to brag, by the way. That's to just, I want to hammer the point home of what Wall Street and what the media is doing to you. And so I have actually posted all over the place on YouTube and on X to actually explicitly say, hey, and it's for the SEC, for the FBI, for the DOJ, I'm laying down these receipts to prove all of this was knowable to anybody who has any, I don't know, talent in finance and in forecasting. And you ought to think that Wall Street, with all of their tools, all of their analytics, all of their money, and all of their people, ought to be able to beat me. And so I am suggesting that there is a misinformation campaign because this is all knowable. And so I believe they're just manipulating. I did not use two eyes there on purpose. That is not decode. But I don't know. Just typing this up too fast. But anyway, I'm suggesting they were manipulating sentiment. Just one more part of all of the wrongdoing that they've been, up to for years, in which we are going to defeat them on. I reminded you throughout the spring and summer that this was coming, and yet Wall Street consensus was negative. But you've seen the records. You've seen the proof. You just say all that stuff out loud logically, so you can't be gaslighted. And we will win. So let's go.